At 6:52 on the third Friday of November, a woman in a yellow apron tied a knot in a piece of white cloth around a ceramic bowl of jollof rice and groundnut soup and set it on the corner of her blue cart the way she had done every Friday for 3 years and 2 months. The Macola market was not yet fully awake. Vegetable sellers were arranging their rows. The men at the main security gate were still in their windbreakers. She had not slept well. She had been up since 4 a.m., running the same calculation she had done 11 times that week, and the number came out the same every time. She was 340 setas short of the fee increase Gerald Asante had posted on the notice taped to her cart handle. She had read the notice so many times she had memorized the font. She checked the knot in the white cloth, adjusted it, and thought about the man she had wrapped it for. She did not know, as her hands worked the cloth, that this man was not who anyone in this market believed him to be. But he had known for nearly 2 years now exactly who she was. Her name was Adaize Mensah. She was 49 years old and weighed 121 pounds in November, which was 17 pounds less than she had weighed on the night. Her husband Emeka died of a stroke in their apartment in Port Harcourt 5.5 years before. She had not been sick. She had been careful with her own portions, so that the 18 series she sent to her daughter in Lagos every month did not drop below what her daughter needed for nursing school fees. She had come to Accra 16 months after Emeka's funeral because poor her pertains to rent she could no longer cover. But, and neighbors who asked questions she had no more energy to answer. A woman from her church had told her about the opportunities in the Macola district, and Adaize had arrived with 2 bags, a letter of reference from her pastor, and a ceramic pot that had belonged to her mother. The pot was dark brown, fired by a potter in Enugu in 1973. There was a small crack along the handle that her mother had repaired in 1989 with a strip of copper wire twisted by hand. The pot had a smell, not a bad smell, but a deep smell, the residue of 46 years of groundnut soup and crayfish and palm oil. Her mother had told her the pot could not be replaced, only inherited. Adaize had carried it in her arms on the bus from Port Harcourt to the Seam border crossing, and from there all the way to Accra, wrapped in the same blue cloth her mother used to cover it between uses. She had been at the blue cart for 3 years and 4 months, 6 days a week from 6:30 a.m. until 3 p.m. Her license was current. Her spot fees had never been late. She sold jollof rice on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, waki on Tuesdays and Thursdays, fried plantain and groundnut sauce on Saturdays. On a good week, she cleared 100 cedis. On a slow week, 710. Her savings, kept in a blue tin inside the false bottom of her cart, had reached 8,400 cedis, enough, if nothing changed, to lease a small shop space on the far side of the Kaneshie interchange by the end of the coming year. She had not told her daughter Chiamaka about the shop plan. She wanted to show her, not tell her. She wore on this Friday morning a blue dress with small white flowers at the collar that she had bought from a second-hand stall near Tima Station for 15 cedis. The dress was clean. She had washed it by hand the night before and pressed it with an iron she borrowed from the woman in the stall next to hers. Her yellow apron was pressed too, though no customer had ever commented on it. Her dignity did not announce itself. It maintained itself. She never served food that had sat longer than 2 hours. She never returned a portion she knew was short. She never reused a cloth that a bowl had sat in. In 3 years and 4 months, no one had ever brought a meal back to her cart, and every Friday, whether the week had been good or difficult, whether the sky from the coast was clear or coming in dark, she wrapped a fresh portion of jollof rice and groundnut soup in a clean piece of white cloth and set it on the left corner of the cart for a man who sat on a low wooden crate 23 meters away, near the second entrance to the market, and who she had never once asked for anything in return. Gerald Asante managed commercial properties on behalf of a company called Kingsbridge Properties Limited, which had been quietly acquiring ground lease rights across the Macola district since 2021. He was 44 years old, slightly heavier in the face than his frame suggested, and he wore short-sleeved button-down shirts in pale colors, cream, light blue, soft gray, and carried a clipboard that he used mainly for holding papers he had already read. He looked at the blue cart the way a person looks at furniture they are already planning to remove. He had come to Adaize's cart on a Thursday afternoon 11 days before this Friday, at the hour when the market was beginning to close, and most of the neighboring vendors were packing. He had waited until the neighboring sellers were close enough to hear. "Your tenancy agreement for this spot expires on the 15th of December," he said, looking at the clipboard rather than at her. "Kingsbridge will not be renewing informal cart agreements in this zone. You have 30 days. Vacate by the 15th. He pulled a printed notice from beneath the clipboard sheet and pressed it against her cart handle. He pressed it twice. She asked him to explain what informal cart agreement meant, given that she had been paying a monthly market licensing fee for over 3 years without a single missed payment. He said the market license and the ground lease were separate instruments in separate jurisdictions. He looked at her for the first time. Then his eyes moved to the white cloth on the corner of the cart. "And if you want to make your numbers work," he said, "I would stop giving your product away." He turned and walked toward the next block of stalls. The man in the adjacent stall, Emmanuel Tete, who sold phone accessories from a folding table covered in a plastic display sheet, had heard the entire exchange. When Gerald arrived, Emmanuel had been reorganizing a row of display cases. When Gerald left, he continued reorganizing them. He did not look up. The following morning, he offered Adiaz half a digestive biscuit and said the market was changing and there was nothing to be done about it. She filed a written objection with the Market Authority office the following Monday, carrying a transparent plastic folder with 3 years and 4 months of receipts arranged by date. The woman at the counter, whose name tag read Beatrice, sorted through 3 of them and told Adiaz, not unkindly, that the Market Authority and the ground lease were administered separately, and she would need to take her objection to the Kingsbridge office on Ring Road Central. Beatrice gave her a card with the address and the office hours. The Kingsbridge building had a lift that was under maintenance. By the time she reached the 4th floor, the jollof rice she had left on the burner was past its serving window, and her second customer of the morning had left. She waited 53 minutes in the Kingsbridge reception area. A man whose nameplate read F. Chimpong came out, told her that formal objections required written submission on the correct form, handed her a 2-page document, and went back through the door before she could ask her first question. She had not made it back to her cart in time to give Kwabena his food that Friday. When she returned at 2:30 in the afternoon, the white cloth was still folded on the corner of the cart where she had left it. She did not know if he had come. She did not know how long he had waited. The rain that fell on a Wednesday in the second week of December came in from the direction of the Korla Lagoon and hit the market roofing the way. Gravel sounds when dropped from a height. It was the kind of rain that found the gaps between tarpaulins and sent cold threads through at irregular intervals. The concrete beneath her cartwheels ran with water. She folded the bottom of her dress up twice and stood on a square of cardboard had found near the vegetables section. The steam from her pot and the cold air coming under the tarp met somewhere around her chest and pressed there. She sold 41 portions that Wednesday. On a dry Wednesday in October, she had sold 74. A woman named Yadarko ran a fabric stall 4 rows south of a Daisy's cart. She was 63 years old and had been at McCullough for 21 years, and she noticed things. On the Wednesday of the heavy rain, she came to a Daisy's cart at 12:40 in the afternoon carrying 2 cups of Milo in a paper bag. She put them on the corner of the cart without asking whether a Daisy wanted them. She said, "Drink before it gets cold," and walked back to her stall without another word. When the Milo reached Adze's stomach, which had been empty since 4 a.m., something steadied. On the last Friday before the December 15th deadline, Kwabena came at his usual time, somewhere between 10:30 and 11. He wore a gray shirt with a frayed second button and canvas shoes that had been wiped clean with something, though the left toe had worn through the canvas entirely. He came and sat on his wooden crate with both hands on his knees. She carried his portion out to him, and he accepted the bowl with both hands and a quiet nod, the same way he always received it, carefully, as though the bowl required care. He ate slowly. When he was finished, he handed the bowl back and said, "The pepper balance is perfect today." Not a compliment exactly, a notation, the kind of thing a person says when they have been keeping a record. She took the bowl, and she noticed, as she had noticed before without thinking much about it, that the white cloth that had wrapped the bowl was folded back into the same precise square she always made, every crease aligned, the same fold every week for 3 years. She had made and wrapped more than 150 portions for him. He had returned every cloth. Not one had gone missing. She thought it was a habit of neatness. She filed it as a habit of neatness and moved on. If this story is already reaching you the way I think it is, subscribe now, because what comes in the next few minutes changes the entire direction of everything. On the 14th of December, a woman from the Accra Market Vendors Support Coalition contacted Adeze through a reference from Ya Darko. The coalition had emergency kitchen access in a shared commercial space on Graphic Road, available to displaced vendors at 180 cedis a month. 4 burners, 2 prep tables, a refrigeration unit, a window onto a courtyard. It was available immediately. She moved in on the morning of the 16th. In the first week, she sold 28 portions. In the second week, 31. The problem was not the space and not the time. The problem was that her customers had found her on their way to work and during their breaks, and the Graphic Road kitchen was 9 blocks from Makola Market, which, in Accra, where people have routines and those routines are inflexible, is a different world entirely. She had a cardboard sign at her old spot with the Graphic Road address. The sign lasted 2 days before someone removed it. And there was the other problem, which she could taste but not name. Her mother's ceramic pot did not sit flat against the electric coil in the shared kitchen. The base curved slightly inward, and the coil heated it unevenly, concentrating heat at the back and leaving the front cool. She tried propping the front with folded foil. She tried different coil settings. The soup came out at 85% of what it was, close enough that most people would not notice, but she noticed, and she served it anyway, which meant every bowl she put out cost her something she could not calculate in cedis. By the end of the third week, she was clearing 480 cedis a week. Her worst full month at the blue cart had cleared 1/100. The blue tin in the false bottom of her cart, which now sat against the wall of the Graphic Road kitchen unused, was no longer growing. She had not seen Kwabena since the last Friday in November. There was no way to see him. She was not at the market. She did not know if he still came. On a Thursday morning in the third week of January, she went back to the Makola district to collect a bag of dried crayfish from her regular supplier, an order she had placed before the eviction that was still being held for her. She was crossing the third lane near the fabric section when Ya Darko called her name. They sat in the narrow space behind Ya Darko's stall on plastic chairs that had been in the sun most of the morning and still held the warmth. Ya Darko poured condensed milk from a tin into 2 small cups of tea and handed one to Adeze without asking about sugar. "The man you feed on Fridays," Ya Darko said. "Do you know who he is?" Adeze said she knew his name was Kwabena. She knew he had been near the market for as long as she had been there. Ya Darko set her cup down. "Kwabena Owusu Boteng," she said. He owned the Oware Kitchen restaurants, 12 locations, Accra, Kumasi, Takoradi, and one in Brixton in London. He ran them for 14 years. She paused. "I worked in the Osu location for 2.5 years before I came to this stall. He walked every kitchen himself every Thursday. He knew every person by name. He knew what every dish on his menu should taste like when it was right." Adeze put her cup down. "He lost everything 4 years ago," Ya Darko said. "A business partner, a man named Dexter Asidu, forged transfer documents and moved all company assets into a holding company while Kwabena was in London. The court proceedings went on for nearly 2 years. Kwabena lost on a procedural matter. All 12 locations passed to the holding company. He had nothing left." She did not use any word for what came after that. She simply said, "I didn't recognize him at first because I did not expect to see him there. And when I finally recognized him, I kept quiet because it was not my story to tell." Adeze was quiet. She was thinking about a Friday morning in her first year at the cart when she had brought him a portion that was over-peppered because a broken burner had thrown off her timing. He had tasted it and said, calmly, "You put the tomatoes in before the oil was fully hot, didn't you?" She had stared at him. He had not said another word about it. She was thinking about how he folded the cloth. She was thinking about the morning he had asked, after eating quietly for 10 minutes, "Your crayfish, you're buying from the woman at the third row of the dried goods section, not the main aisle supplier?" She had said yes. He had nodded. He did not explain why he was asking. She was thinking about 154 cloths. 154 returned, folded to exact dimensions, every crease in place, the way fabric is folded in a professional kitchen where precision is not optional. "I saw something in the papers last month," Ya Darko said. "A company called Oware Group filed new business registration documents in October. His name is on the filing." She looked at Adeze for a moment. "He was at his crate last Friday. I saw him. He sat until 11:30, and then he folded the crate and put it against the wall and left." She had not been there. She had been on Graphic Road, standing over a coil that curved the heat wrong, making a soup that was 85% of what her mother had taught her to make. 17 days after that Thursday morning, a Gulfstream aircraft landed at Kotoka International Airport in Accra at 8:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. It had flown in overnight from Heathrow. Two people came down the stairs, a man in a dark charcoal jacket and a woman carrying a leather portfolio case. The man was 61 years old, 183 pounds, with close-cut gray at both temples. He moved without urgency, the particular unhurriedness of someone who had learned, in 4 very difficult years, not to rush anything. His name was Kwabena Owusu-Boateng. He went directly to the Kingsbridge Properties office on Ring Road Central. He had a 9:15 appointment with the Director of Acquisitions, a representative from Goldfield Capital, an investment group in which Kwabena's newly registered Aware Group held a 12% equity stake, attended the same meeting. The meeting lasted 41 minutes. At the end of it, a document was signed that transferred operational oversight of the Makola commercial zone to a revised governance framework. The framework included, on page 3, a clause specifying that informal vendors with an unbroken licensing record of 24 months or more could not be removed from their assigned positions without a minimum 14-month notice period and a mandatory alternative placement offer at equivalent terms. Gerald Asante was in that meeting room. He sat 2 seats to the left of the Director of Acquisitions with his clipboard in his lap. He did not speak. When the document was passed across to him for acknowledgement, he reached for the pen and his hand stopped. Briefly, barely visible, but the woman with the leather portfolio saw it, and then he signed. The first implementation gathering under the new framework was scheduled for the covered market district near Makola on the first Thursday of February, in the open air, among the vendors. That afternoon at 2:07, Kwabena came through the courtyard entrance of the Graphic Road Community Kitchen. He was wearing a plain white shirt and dark trousers. His shoes were clean. There was a man preparing beans at the far burner, looked up when the door opened, then went back to his pot. Adaze was at the prep table wiping down the burner surface. She heard the door and turned. She recognized him before she understood what she was seeing. He stood in the doorway a moment, looking at the ceramic pot sitting on the prep table. Then he looked at her. "Your soup was not right for the last 3 weeks of the year," he said. "I could tell." "Not you, the pot. A curved base needs a flat fire, not a coil." He came in and sat on the bench beside the prep table. He set a folder on the table between them. He did not open it immediately. "I ate your food for 3 years and 2 months," he said, 154 Fridays. "You never once sent a portion that you had not made yourself, from the right ingredients, in the right cloth." He looked at the pot. "Do you know how many restaurants I owned before I lost them?" She said she had heard 12. He nodded once. 12. 14 years. I walked every kitchen every week. I know what food tastes like when the person making it believes in it." He paused. "And you gave it to me every week without asking me a single question." He opened the folder. The document inside was a partnership agreement between Aware Group Limited and a business entity named, in the draft, Mensa Kitchen. It specified a 23% revenue share, a monthly operational draw of 6,500 cedis for the first 12 months, a full kitchen setup to be funded by Aware Group at a cantonment's location, and a separate line item covering 14,200 naira in outstanding nursing training fees at an institution in Lagos. He had named the exact amount. He had named the institution. She looked at him. "You told me everything," he said, "every Friday, in the food." She looked at the document for a long time. She looked at her mother's ceramic pot, the copper wire repair on the handle, the 46 years of accumulated smell, the slightly curved base that no electric coil could hold right. She thought about 340 cedis. She thought about the notice pressed twice against her cart handle. She thought about what 85% feels like when you have spent a lifetime knowing what 100% is. "The pot comes with you," he said. Gerald Asante thought he was taking a market spot from a woman with a blue cart and a yellow apron and a plastic folder of receipts that didn't count in his jurisdiction. What he could not count, and what he could not take, was what she had been building across 3 years of Fridays without knowing it had a name. He took the spot. He could not take the hands. He could not take the copper wire on the pot handle, or the exact temperature her oil reached before the tomatoes went in, or the 154 cloths she had washed and reused without losing one. He could not take what she had given away every Friday without once asking whether it mattered. The people who try to remove you from the place where you are doing the thing you were made to do rarely know what they are actually removing you from. They see the surface of things. They see a cart near a market gate, a license in a separate jurisdiction, a woman who gives food to someone who cannot pay for it. They do not see the 14 years of attention that recognized the food for what it was. They do not see the recording happening across 154 Friday mornings, the crayfish supplier, the oil temperature, the pepper balance. They do not see the cloth being folded back into the same exact square, every crease in place, every single week, because some habits belong to a person who walked 12 professional kitchens and carried that discipline into a gray shirt with a frayed second button. They cannot see these things because they have not learned to look past the surface of things. That is their limitation. It should not become yours. Some things cannot be taken by a 30-day notice. Some things cannot be taken by a broken lift on the 4th floor, a 2-page form you were never shown how to fill, or a pen pressed twice against a cart handle. You can be removed from a location. You cannot be removed from what you have learned. You cannot be removed from what you have built, quietly, across years of ordinary mornings, in the everyday practice of doing something well without asking for an audience. The world does not always recognize what it is standing in the presence of, but the ones who recognize it, the ones who have spent 14 years walking kitchens and know the difference between food made with belief and food made without it, they will find it. They find it in the places no one is looking. At a wooden crate 23 meters from a blue cart, at 85% of what a thing should be, which told someone exactly what the other 15% looked like. On the first Thursday of February, the vendor framework meeting took place in the open air in the covered market district near Macola Market. Aday's Mensa sat in the second row with a blue folder on her lap, holding a signed partnership agreement and a new business registration document for Chikitchen. Kiamaka, her daughter, had flown in from Lagos 2 days earlier and sat beside her. Ya Darko was in the front row. Kwabena spoke for 12 minutes and answered questions for 34. When the meeting ended and people began to leave, Ya Darko walked to where Adays was standing and put one hand on her forearm and said nothing. She did not need to say anything. The ceramic pot was already in a transport crate in a vehicle parked outside the market, on its way to the new kitchen space in cantonments. It still smelled of shea butter and palm oil and every Friday it had ever been asked to hold. Before I let you go today, I want to ask you something. If you had been feeding someone for 3 years, quietly, without asking for their story, without asking for anything at all, and then you found out their story was bigger than anything you had imagined, would that change the reason you were doing it? Or would it only confirm something you already understood somewhere beneath the counting and the calculations and the 30-day notices? Leave your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to read it. If stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people this world overlooks until they change everything are the reason you come here, subscribe. There are more of these coming. I'll see you in the next one.